This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten. This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of troutbitten.com. So we're halfway through this winter skills series, and tonight my friend Austin and I are here to talk about how we like to fish the long flies. We're covering streamers, and more specifically, this episode covers what is different about streamers in the wintertime, what is unique in how we fish them versus how we fish streamers in the warmer months. Now, since we're halfway through season 6, I want to thank everyone who makes this Troutbitten podcast possible. Views and support continue to grow exponentially, and we've now passed 500,000 downloads.
Hey now.
That's cool, right?
That's amazing.
We've received a lot of messages thanking us for the podcast material, and that's great. But honestly, thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting our ad sponsors for this season too. Orvis, Squala, Fulling Mill, Tactical Fly Fisher, Smith Creek, Precision Fly and Tackle, and New Trail Brewing Company. All of the support and planning comes together every week to build a podcast that I believe will be relevant for a long, long time. And that's something we're proud of. Let me also acknowledge and thank my friend Austin Dando for what he contributes here every week. Thank you, Austin.
My pleasure, buddy. Happy to be part of all this.
Good to see you every week.
It's good to see you two over the computer.
Isn't that nice? What's funny is Austin lives, not even an hour away, right?
Yeah.
Close to an hour.
Yeah.
But we still only see each other maybe once a month.
Yeah, the visual aspect helps with the communication, and it's good to catch up once a week and talk before and after the show.
Yeah, it helps with the friendship. It does, you know?
For sure.
So a lot of people don't realize that we do this remotely. It's like a glorified Zoom. It's ironically a program called Riverside, piece of software called Riverside. And it works really well for us. And yeah, we can all see each other. You all have a mic and we're sitting in front of it and looking at each other. And it's good to see you once a week, buddy. That's how we do it with Matt out in Montana. So that'll be season 7 when we have the full crew back. Actually, in episode 8 of this season, the guys will be back and we'll do a roundtable review, which we do at the end of every skills series. The guys come in and they say, hey, here's what you missed.
Bill says, here's what I disagree with.
That's right. He knows his role. All right, Austin, you want to dig in?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Get right to it.
See if we can go sub 1 hour. What do you think?
Bring it in just under an hour. All right, let's dig in. Streamers in the winter. Hey, I talked to our friend Bill, we just mentioned. Talked to him the other day, and he's part of the full crew when we do this long-form podcast. And I asked for his advice on winter streamer fishing for this episode. And of course, he had a bunch of ideas, as he always does. Bill is one of the best streamer anglers that I know. And as we've all come to expect, he always has some different ideas and good ideas because he spends a ton of time on the water, a lot of days. He fishes hard and he likes to figure stuff out for himself too. So Bill wrote a few things down for us that we can mix in here as we go. And I kind of like his format too when he sent me this email, the way he laid things out. So let's use it for this episode. As we go through this tonight, Austin, let's cover these sections: why we fish streamers, where we fish streamers, how we fish streamers, when we fish streamers, and what we use to fish streamers. All of this, of course, in the wintertime. Like, that's the focus. So Bill, with his categories there, used the old writer's trick of who, what, where, when, why, and how. I see what he did there, Bill. I had English composition classes too.
Pretty clever.
Isn't he clever? So you ready, Austin?
Ready.
All right, dude. So why do we fish streamers in the winter? That's the first thing. Why are we fishing them?
In the wintertime, it can be a really nice change of pace, especially on some long days where we're locked into watching dead drifts and trying to get drag-free drifts all day. And it can be a good break of pace, and also to kind of get the legs moving and stay warm and work our way upstream or downstream. Yeah. It's just a really nice active approach to a cold winter's day.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit in episode 1. Like I said, it's just a good breakup from the dead drifts that I'm trying to get all the time. I get tired of getting dead drifts. And so all times of the year, we'll fish streamers for that, just to do something different. Tired of getting dead drifts. Open it up do something different. And because we do find fish looking for something different a lot of times too. We've mentioned before, because just to remind you, I mean, we've done full podcasts on just streamer fishing a couple times with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all talked about how we like to fish streamers usually when we're looking for a streamer bite. It's rare for me, and I think for a lot of us anyway, to just say, all right, I'm going to go out there and fish streamers, for this whole weekend. I got a 2-day trip, and I'm just going to fish streamers. I have done that. Actually, at the end here, I might tell a story about how I did that, and it worked almost accidentally. But anyway, my thing is just kind of, like you said, do it for a change up. I like to do it to stay warm. I mentioned I'll nymph upstream for a while until I get cold, or I'll nymph, a bobber hole like we talked about last week. And you're not moving a whole lot then. Like you said, you can actually get ice building up around you.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't stand it anymore, I'll fish streamers because I know that's going to keep me moving. What we mean by that is we're moving because we don't expect trout to, eat a streamer on the 8th, 9th, or 10th drift in the same spot, right?
Exactly. We've said many times that often our first or second offering to that trout is our best chance. And if it's not going to take on those, we just keep moving up and try to find the next fish we can. Bill always says he's looking for one kamikaze fish. And if he covers enough water, even if it's a really hard day, all he needs is one kamikaze.
That's right.
The other nice thing about wintertime too is it's some of our least lit hours of the day. So we have more dark, or at least more cloudy or overcast conditions, less sunlight on the water, which equals more streamer interest often, and better opportunities to kind of optimize those tactics.
Yeah, a lot of times those conditions just kind of call to us, and we say, it just looks like it might be a good time to throw some streamers and see what happens.
Yeah. Good gray skies. Rarely it's a bluebird sunny day. A lot of gray in central Pennsylvania come December.
Oh, gotta love it.
Yeah.
Not just for streamer fishing either. But that's, I think, why a lot of times the fishing is pretty damn good. But we talk about covering water, and you said how Bill's looking for the kamikaze fish. Mm-hmm. If you cover enough water, you're going to find that fish, or 2 or 3 of them by the end of the day. And I think that's why many anglers, like fishing streamers from a boat. If you can get on a boat in the wintertime or any time of the year, I love fishing streamers. You're going to cover 10, 12, however many miles in a day. Yeah. If you keep it up, you're going to find that kamikaze fish, even when there's not a streamer bite, let's say.
Exactly. Wintertime also, Bill made an excellent point of being post-spawn. Coming out of the fall into the colder months, those fish are often looking to put on pounds again or recover their health from everything that went on during that, rebuild their strength after spawn. So a big meal can be pretty enticing, especially a trout looking to catch up on the calories.
Nice. That's right. Yeah, they're kind of thin right after the spawn. I mean, a lot of times you can catch a fish and go, "Ooh, that one was spawning."
Yeah.
But anyway, they quite often are looking for that bigger meal. They might give chase a little bit more frequently. Our buddy Pat used to call winter season streamer season. And when he first right? When he first started saying that, I was like, I don't get that. Because everybody always said low and slow. And I'm like, well, the way I fish streamers isn't real low and slow. So to me, that this streamer thing always kind of went against that low and slow in the winter concept, though. But not necessarily, right? And we're going to talk about how we fish these streamers in a little bit.
Yeah.
So where we fish streamers in the winter is sort of the next topic, the next category here. And I'll start off by saying anywhere.
Right on.
I mean, streamers are always like that. I don't care if it's wintertime, springtime, summertime, fall time. Fish them anywhere you want to. Now, what I mean is anything can happen at any time. We know that's the way it is on any trout river. But how do we up our odds? That's what we really want to talk about here. What's your best water type, Austin?
Yeah. For me, in the wintertime, it can be some of the slower paced water. And that's either things like pools, tail outs especially. I really like bank water, even shallow bank water. It doesn't have to be deep. Right. Just good areas where the riverbed has slowed down the water enough that you can reach its depth and provide a decent retrieve.
I met a guy a couple weeks ago on one of our favorite streams, and he was the only guy out there that day. It was one of the cold days that we've had, which we haven't had too many cold days, but there had been a string of cold days, and we had some shelf ice, but not all over the river. Mm-hmm. And we got to talk, and he was cool. I don't talk to everybody on the river, right? I'm kind of out there to be alone, but I don't know why. We started talking. We just started exchanging ideas and our experiences. And he had been out there for a few days. You know what I mean? He'd been fishing this winter. And he was saying like, oh, I never fished the banks this time because the bank water is too cold. He said, I'm looking for the warmest water, and that's going to be in the middle of the river. And I didn't disagree with him standing there on the riverbank. But I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, that's not really my experience. And I think I've heard, people say that before, and I think it's a fair assumption too, especially if you look over and there is some shelf ice at certain points of the river. You're going to think, well, that water on the edges is just going to be too cold for trout to sit, and they're going to go to the middle. You're going to assume that the middle is the warmest. And you're also going to assume maybe that the trout are looking for the warmest water. But what you just said is what made me think about this. I do quite well a lot of times in bank water that's I'm going to say calf deep sometimes. I don't care if there is some shelf ice. Yeah, or less, right.
Yeah.
I don't care if there is, some shelf ice on some parts of the river. It doesn't mean that all of the river is going to be, I don't know. It's definitely not too cold for trout on the banks. How do I know?
Yeah,
well, same as you, I catch trout over there. We should acknowledge too that a lot of times spring water is coming out of the edges. But I'm sure too that it's not just in spring water locations or zones where I'm catching those trout, like you said, in maybe even calf deep water right against the bank. If it's slow, that's where they're going to go a lot of times. And I will target that with my streamers. Just like nymphs, I'm going to note, hey, where am I getting action? Oh, wow, I am getting trout right off the bank there. Well, I'll keep hitting it. Yeah. Or, man, I've been hitting a lot of that water all morning and nothing's coming out of there, but everything's coming out of the deep stuff. Well, okay. You're going to mentally note all that stuff and try to do something repeatable.
Yeah, and that's an interesting idea to think that the coldest water is always on the edges. But as you just pointed out, we have a lot of spring seeps consistently through these creeks that can kind of break up that pattern. I also think it's just a natural thing for the ice to start on the sides where it has something to cling to and get started.
Good point.
So I don't even think it's always the coldest on the sides versus the middle.
Me neither. And we have a lot of bends in our river, and I think that just mixes the water up. You think about where the flow goes, it goes and hits that outside bend. Now, is the inside bend the coldest? I don't know, because it's, just 50 yards down and everything's going to reverse. It's going to go the other way. I think it mixes it up pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not all sitting in the same spot all the time.
Yep, I think it stays mixed. But you hit on what I think is maybe the most important thing to point out. It's slower water. It is, I'm going to say almost never, catch a bunch of trout in the winter on streamers in the deepest and fastest stuff. Now, we said this about nymphs too.
Yep.
That we're not targeting the deepest. Well, we're not targeting the fastest stuff. Sometimes the deepest. But I am not targeting the fastest stuff that I can find with streamers either.
No. And a great place to look, just like if we're nymphing, is on the edges or those merger seams that we talked about last episode for nymphing, is if you see some fast water and there's a break in that current and some slow water on each side, maybe there's a pocket downstream of a rock, any sort of slow stall that borders some harder water is a great spot to look for. And the reason being is we often don't want to ask those trout to do a lot. We want to ask the least amount of them.
That's right.
Because they're kind of asking the least amount of themselves. So they're not going to be holding in that hardest, fastest water. So that's where we want to put our streamer.
Yeah, right on. I like to say make it easy for them. And we'll acknowledge here that, okay, last week we said that for a nymph, we expect them to maybe only move 4 inches or 6 inches, maybe 12 inches at the most, but probably more like half a foot for a nymph, a smaller food form. With a bigger food form, we expect them to not necessarily chase halfway across the river, actually not at all, but I expect them to move a foot or 2 or 3 or maybe 4 feet. It also really depends on that water type, and I think that's really why we're saying, especially in the wintertime, to fish that slower water, because then it isn't asking too much for a trout. They're not expending that much energy, let's say in a slow pool, to move 3 or 4 feet. That's not too big of an ask.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just kind of, like we say, it's just kind of like meat and trout on their own terms, and that's their terms, slower water. Hey, Bill pointed this out, and I like this a lot. He was talking about, fishing pools and flats, and again, slower water. And then he said, locate structure in that slower water. So if you have a big old log in the middle of a pool, some kind of structure, or just a big boulder, whatever structure you can find in slow water, that's a great location. I thought that was great advice. And that's something I hadn't really thought of. I think we all kind of do a lot of these things naturally. And then when we start talking about it and asking other guys what their ideas are, You
Yeah.
go, oh yeah, good point.
Yeah. Bill is good at thinking about that. He mentions cover quite often. So
Yeah.
like even when I've been out with him nymphing and I'll walk up to a really good, nice looking run that maybe he's fished many times before and I haven't.
Yeah.
He'll say, yeah, it looks really good, but it's totally exposed. There's no cover on the bank. There's no overhanging brush, but give it a try. And then it'll be, a struggle. And, his point goes to show that those fish are looking for cover. They're looking for safety. They're looking for refuge.
Yeah, right on. These are brown trout too that we're mostly fishing for. It holds true with rainbow trout too. But I mean, trout, especially streamers, fish your streamers on structure because trout like to hold the structure. But brown trout, more than any other species, love to hold to that structure. Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. Precision Fly and Tackle is a family-owned business with a passion for the outdoors and a sense of adventure. They are anglers who enjoy every moment spent on the water with family and friends. Precision Fly and Tackle carries the widest selection of Euro rods, reels, lines, leaders, flies, and accessories. From the beginner to the advanced angler, Precision Fly and Tackle can outfit every angler, no matter the budget. Visit them online at precisionflyandtackle.com. Then use code TROUTBITTEN10, that's the number 10, for 10% off your order. Gear up with Precision Fly and Tackle for your next adventure.
All right, so then how do we fish streamers in the wintertime? Let's start with another thing that Bill said, because we really like it. And he has something he calls the super pause, which is a great name. And
it is.
At Troutbitten, we like having names for things.
I did. I started an article on the super pause.
Super pause is going to be a winner there already.
Yep.
But in Bill's words, this is the super pause season.
Yeah.
Move the streamer a few feet at a time and follow that with 3 to 7 seconds worth of pauses in between the strips.
Yeah, and I love that. I love it because, it's something different. Man, I got to thinking about this, and Bill has talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't pause a streamer that long.
Neither do I.
Right? And I'm going to be disciplined, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to count it. I'm going to go up to 7 seconds before I move it again. Like he said, strip it, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, and then I'll strip it again. I'm going to have that discipline. I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it a shot. Why? Because I never do. It's something new to try out there. So I fished streamers off and on. As soon as I got into fly fishing, I figured I'd be a good streamer angler because I came from fishing minnows. That was not the case. And really, I started to do a lot better when I started to fish streamers on a mono rig and had a ton of control like I used to when I was, dead drifting those strung minnows on a spinning rod. I could do some really neat things with the mono rig and then kind of combine fly fishing tactics along with that kind of a hybrid system. Anyway, I was not great at streamers right away. And then when Gallup wrote the book in 2002 or 2003 or something like that, Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout, I'm serious, I got into that. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is the way I'm going to do it. And we've talked about this before. I did that for 10, 11, 12 months. And so I very strictly followed through with that for many months. And there's a lot of movement in the way you're usually doing that. The way he's, the jerk strip, trying to piss trout off and get in their zone and make them be predators and all that. That's fun. It's a great way to fish. But that incorporates a lot of movement. And what I'm saying is, since then, that's one style. I still fish it. I think it's a lot of fun. I do it most from a boat, and I always do it, I only do it when I'm covering a lot of water. So there's a lot of other ways that I've kind of learned to fish a streamer. I kind of went back and I really dug back into trout tactics from Joe Humphreys. And I could show you my book. I have it marked up. There are like 6 different ways he says to fish streamers. And in my mind, like you said, we like having names for all these things.
Yeah.
In my mind, I always know which one I'm doing. I always kind of know what I'm trying to do with the streamer. And the point is that all of the tactics that Gallup was saying, and even the stuff that Humphreys was saying, mostly, I was moving it. I'm moving the streamer. And I've said this before, like, okay, I nymph all day, and now I'm going to throw streamers. Well, I've been dead drifting stuff, so I'm going to move this damn streamer. I'm going to move it. But here's Bill saying, just pause it for 7 seconds.
Right.
And so I just don't do that. Like the most I pause is like 2 seconds. He's saying pause 3 to 7 seconds. And I love that, the super pause.
Yeah. His minimum super pause is your maximum.
That's it. Exactly, man. Yep. And I know when he's on in episode 8 here, we'll talk more about this super pause concept. I will say when it's paused, that doesn't mean it's dead drifting. There's still some tension to it. You could say it's drifting. It might be swinging even a little bit. There's some tension. It's still moving. And then remember too that we have built into our streamers, with the marabou and the hackle and whatever else is on there, craft fur and whatnot. There's a lot of motion in a streamer inherent, even without us stripping or jigging or twitching it. So it's still moving. It's still attracting trout. And so I need to settle myself down, I think, especially in the wintertime, and try the super pause.
Yeah. Last time Bill and I were out, actually, we fished that tactic exclusively almost. Yeah. And he kind of set me up with his rig because you have to fish a fly in a rig that's built for that style. So
this is a good point.
If you're going to try to do a super pause in so medium depth water, let's say knee deep or less, and you let your fly sit there for 7 seconds and it's got however much weight built into it, it may just rock it down to the bottom. And that's counterproductive to what this is all about. What do you want to make sure is that you match the fly to the tactic. So when Bill makes his flies, he's thinking not just about weight built into it, but he's thinking about water weight too. So how much that fly is somewhat neutrally buoyant or may hang in the middle of the water column. So when he pauses it, it may drop some while it's moving, but it is not plummeting. And that's what makes it even more attractive, I think. It's kind of got this natural drop. It's not all of a sudden.
Right on.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And not all of Bill's flies in his box are like that, but the ones that he uses for the super pause are.
Right.
And I know what he's using. It's like 3.5 millimeter tungsten beads a lot of times on an articulated streamer that is, 3 to 4 inches. That's fair. I think it's 3 to 4 inches long and maybe built on, a pair of number 4 hooks, like B10Ss, something like that. So they're a little lighter than a lot of streamers of that size might be. And again, he's not using a sinking line, not trying to get a quick drop rate at all. Trying to almost, I'm not going to say suspend it. There is some drop there. But again, like you said, if you're pausing it for 7 seconds, you got to figure, like, you're not trying to get it to plummet to the bottom.
No.
You could do this with split shot too. Bill would love that. But
we'll have to ask him about that.
But no, seriously, I do this with a bunny bullet a lot. My favorite sculpin. And I'll put just a number 1, which is 30 centigrams, a number 1 split shot. And that bunny bullet for me, there's some lead built in. To almost counteract the buoyancy of the deer hair head. And it's a great fly. And I have always fished it with split shot because I feel like that split shot gives it some forgiveness and some room to move how it really wants to and whatever. So it's a great thing to do this super pause with and to fish kind of those slower motions, even before I had this super pause concept in my head. But I'd be trying to slow myself down and remind myself that a sculpin isn't a good swimmer. So don't swim it very far. Don't swim it fast. Don't swim it a lot. The sculpin will swim and then it goes head down and it just tries to settle down in it. Sculpins don't move a whole lot.
That's an excellent point. So sort of contrary to that is another popular style, which is just jigging the fly, which is a very aggressive lift and a very sudden fall. Various degrees of jigging can be used depending on how heavily we weight that fly, what depth we fish that fly, what speed. I personally don't do jigging as a main approach. I do like it sometimes in the water is a little harder and faster. Let's say I'm fishing some pocket water that I need to get down into in some slower spots. I can kind of stay in touch with that fly a little bit more obviously. but it's not my first approach, I'd say.
I do a lot of jigging, but I know you don't. And when we talk about our craft fur jig, you fish it not on a jig hook and not very heavy. You said what, like a 4 millimeter bead sometimes, or a 3.5?
Yep.
Again, you can get it down, but you're not trying to get that rocking up and down motion.
Right.
For me, I mean, I've been fishing jigs for a long time. We got a video coming out here on Tuesday about the craft fur jig, and it's just a style. And it can be a lead ball jig. You could put a slotted tungsten bead on it, whatever, or you can fish it your way. This craft fur streamer is just very versatile. And anyway, we can fish that in a bunch of different ways, but my favorite, and I pointed this out in the video, is to use that sort of heavier head to get it to rock up and down, up and down. And jigging is, that's the thing right now. The industry takes these cycles and these turns, and everybody's talking about jig streamers. I think it's cool, but they don't always have to be real small either. Anyway, so it's a good thing to do in the winter. Now, I found it interesting how you just said you'll fish it in faster water. I tend to jig actually in slower water more than anything else.
Huh.
So, I mean, jigging is just
That's
a timeless technique from...
Yeah, it probably works everywhere.
From the beginning, right? Of every fisherman ever has jigged flies up and down, and it just catches fish. It doesn't always have to be aggressive either. The lift doesn't have to be real fast up. You can just easily lift.
That's true.
It can be a subtle lift and subtle fall. Like you said, there's various degrees to that. Another thing I'll do with the heavier set, let's say you need a heavier fly to jig. Like we acknowledge that. You need a heavy head to jig. And whether it's a heavy head or just the whole fly is kind of built to be heavy, I like to use a heavier fly or a heavier split shot and crawl the bottom. This is one of those Humphreys styles that I have numbered in that book.
Yeah.
And he's talking about getting a sculpin, either with the split shot all the way down to the sculpin's head or, 5 or 6 inches up, and using weight to crawl the bottom. Because again, that's where the bait fish are, right? It's an odd thing for a bait fish to be hanging out in the middle of the column. And if we want our streamer to really look like something normal, average, usual,
Yep.
something that the trout is used to seeing, then we shouldn't be in the middle of the column necessarily, right? And if we are in the middle of the column, maybe it is good to let it fall back down where the bait fish probably is trying to get to, the real ones. So anyway, I'll crawl the bottom. That's a fun thing to do if you can do it without getting hung up. So you kind of need to choose your water for that. Don't do it in places where there's a lot of wood. That's no fun.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another technique here is the crossover technique, which you've written pretty extensively about. And this is sort of a combination of a part dead drift and a part streamer presentation. You can do it a few different ways.
Yeah.
But the way that looks is to make a cast upstream and either, let's say upstream, and either actively retrieve that fly with some sort of motion as it approaches you, and then lift up all slack if you have any, and go tight to the streamer and dead drift it past you. Yeah. Or you can kind of go the opposite end there and cast that streamer almost like a nymph and dead drift it right off the bat until it gets right down below you and go into a swing, and then a retrieve that, again, puts in part that motion. That's what we call a crossover technique, where you incorporate both into one drift. Right on. I love the crossover, and I do it a lot in the winter. I think of it as I'm going to establish a nymphing drift, and then as soon as that is established, as soon as I feel like I got my strike zone or actually touched the bottom, now I'm going to try to animate the fly with minor motions. Yeah. A 2-inch strip, a 3-inch lift, and then let it drop. Or just maybe a cross stream strip, but boy, only like 6 inches across stream. So I do small motions. And then to be honest, because I have the streamer on there, lots of times I'm like, well, that spot over on the bank, I'm not going to cast upstream. I'll cast down and across because that's the only way I can reach it. And then I'll just do regular streamer stuff with it. I will strip it across and just whatever. You got the fly on there, do what you want with it. But for the most part, that crossover technique, I should say too, I'll pair that up usually with a nymph. And I feel that kind of having the nymph on there, let's say it's either tagged up above 12, 14, 16 inches, like we talked about last week, because this is wintertime. Yep. I'm not going to ride at 24 inches up. Okay. So I have my nymph above my streamer, let's say a foot. Or I could trail it behind the streamer a foot. Again, let's just round it off and say that. These are kind of the wintertime tactics.
And because I have that nymph on there, it like constantly reminds me like, hey, I could do nymphing stuff with this crossover technique. Even though I have the streamer on, I can slow down. Well, let's just dead drift it for half of the drift or for the whole thing. Just do nymphing things. Expect them to hit the nymph. Or then on the next cast, throw the streamer and think more streamer things. That's why to me it's a crossover rig. You can kind of do both things.
Yeah, that way you can go nymphing and still call it streamer fishing.
There you go. Does that make you an elitist?
Yeah. So overall, what we're saying is probably move the fly a little less and drift more and try not to turn them off.
Yeah. In the wintertime, move it less, strip less. Like you said, drift more. I like that. So that's kind of how we fish them and different techniques and whatnot. But when do we fish streamers in the winter? Really, we're asking what time of the day or what conditions signal to you that it's a good time for streamers on a winter trip when you're out there.
Going back to mornings and evenings and sort of the advantage of the winter is the low light availability. Good flows, of course, helps too. A little bit of color. It's nice this winter compared to last. Last winter we had really low flows, super clear water, made for really challenging streamer bite. This year is the exact opposite.
It is.
Really healthy flows, good green, blue color to it, a little bit of chalk, but not muddy.
And if you combine that with the low light, if you think about the arc of the sun in the wintertime, it never really gets straight overhead. It's not like right on top of them. So the trout are never as spooky in the winter. I think that's fair to say,
Yeah, and again, with that cloud cover, even if it is, it's so diminished compared to a spring day or even some fall days that it's just not the same.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, we'll fish streamers just as a change up, just a change away from dead drifting nymphs and the sometimes dead drifting of dry flies. I get tired of dead drifting, and so we'll change just to do something fun and to keep warm, to move around.
And I'll do the same thing even throughout the day. If the nymphing action is slow and, let's say I've not touched a fish in 30, 45 minutes, I'm going to be constantly changing back to streamers just for the sake of doing something different, breaking patterns. Fishing a streamer for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and going back to nymphing because it gives me that renewed hope or renewed expectation that something different might happen. Along with that, it's nice to have streamers in your pocket where nymphs just don't cover certain types of water that you want to fish well.
For sure.
Sometimes those slow tail outs or that weird bank water that's kind of sitting still or even some of the more or less frog water that we might blast through and skip altogether. You're not going to be able to do a lot of technical or tactical nymphing in those water setups often like you can with the streamer presentation. So it's excellent to use.
Yeah, before I started fishing streamers a lot in the wintertime, I would often just skip, half the water sometimes, depending on the type of river I was in. There's a lot of stuff, the pools and the flats and the slow stuff, that I would say, this isn't good for nymphs. I'm going to go up to the stuff that's moving a little bit more. But again, streamers in slow water, especially around structure, that's your ticket right there. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques from the international competitive fly fishing scene. Tactical Fly Fisher's aim is to help you improve your angling ability so you can have more fun on the water. Whether you need some flies, fly tying equipment, or a new rod or reel, they've got you covered. Head on over to tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TBPOD10, that's TBPOD10, to get 10% off flies, fly tying supplies, or terminal tackle. For over a decade, Smith Creek has provided innovative, high-quality fly fishing accessories designed to put your gear in easy reach, free up your hands, and keep our waters clean. For 2023, check out the all-new patented tippet holder. Each unit is individually machined from billet aluminum and anodized in 2 eye-catching colors. They hold up to 5 tippet spools with a spring-loaded plunger that is quick and easy to use, keeping your tippet spools right where you need them. Also, the brand new Rod Clip Plus comes with an improved 304 steel pin, plus a carabiner clip, giving you 2 ways to attach it. All Smith Creek products are built guide tough and backed by solid customer service. To learn more about Smith Creek products, visit their website at smithcreek.co. Bill pointed this out. That he says he doesn't fish streamers when it's much below like 15 degrees because you spend more time cleaning ice out of your guides than fishing. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
And often on the coldest days, I'm like, man, it's 12 degrees out here. And when you have line going in and out of your guides, that's water that has gone then in and out of your guides, because of course the line carries the water with it. And ice up. And there's ways to de-ice, and we're going to talk about that here in a couple episodes, all the troubles and the ways to solve, to deal with some of those problems.
Not necessarily solve.
You never solve them. But anyway, when you are below, that's a good mark too, 20 or 15 degrees, you have a lot more ice up issues. So I will do more tactics, nymphing tactics, for example, that have more of a static line presentation. You can almost treat it like tenkara, where, you know what, I'm going to fish this fixed line of 25 or 30 feet away, and that's it. So I don't have line going in and out of my guides. And so when do we fish them? A lot of times in the warmer parts of the day, even though we have been talking about, fishing them in the morning. Well, sometimes if it's 10 degrees, I'm not going to opt for that.
Mm-hmm.
So what Bill was saying there, that's a good point. And it leads us into sort of this final question of what we use to fish streamers in the winter. And Bill mentioned that he uses a 5-weight if he's planning on fishing streamers like all day long, or larger, 5-weight or larger, because the rod guides are bigger. I thought about this. The rod guides are bigger. That's fair. I don't know if there's that much difference between the 4 and the 5-weight, but there sure is a difference between the guides on a 2 or 3-weight, let's say even a Euro nymphing rod, versus the guides on a 5-weight, which is a more versatile rod. There is, especially you get back to the specialized rods. And if you have this Euro nymphing rod, those guides are often designed to be very skinny.
Exactly.
Small diameter, right? And there's more of them too. Well, you're going to build up more ice. And if it is one of those cold days and it is, kind of true winter conditions, that's going to be tougher. So the tools we use in the winter might be different. Yeah.
Let's talk about lines then.
Yeah.
What's moving in and out of those rod guides for us here.
Right.
I think for us, most generally, we're fishing a mono rig, at least when we're wade fishing. We're not talking about out of a boat necessarily right now.
Right.
And the mono rig is nice because it is a lot finer and a lot thinner than a fly line.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold as much water mass when it goes through the rod guide.
Mm-hmm.
It's also great for really precise line control over how we manipulate that fly underwater and the presentations that we just talked about beforehand here. The mono rig's just hard to beat for all those levels of control that we have at our fingertips there.
It really is. That's why we use it. We're talking here about a standard Troutbitten mono rig. That's a 20-pound butt section. The longer time goes on, the more people are using micro mono rigs, it can be great too. I don't really like to fish streamers on them for a bunch of reasons we won't get into here. What we're talking is sort of this hybrid approach. You can do what you just said, Austin, and have this great control about where the fly goes in, and then how do you want to place that leader. Lots of times I will mend the standard mono rig. I'll mend that line on the water to get the same kind of presentation that we would if we were, mending a fly line. You can do that kind of stuff with the thicker butt section. We have a video about that coming out here in probably a couple weeks too. I don't know. That's something to think about. Allows us to do a lot of different things, however you want to present it, and if it works for you. Just like we said with nips, if you're good at it, do it. If you're interested in it, go figure out if it works for you,
There's also, by nature of this, less casting involved when we're fishing a mono rig setup versus a traditional fly line, because we have the weight of the streamer to pull the line to the target rather than relying on the weight of the line to push the fly to the target.
There it is.
So we can have some line off the reel and simply make one forward stroke and shoot that fly directly all the way out.
There you go.
And retrieve it back to ourselves, which is another really ice-saving trick.
Right. Ice saving. Yeah. That's a good point. The more you're casting in the wintertime, the more you're going to build up ice. And so the less false casting you have to do, the better. Absolutely. Yeah. That principle almost always holds true, but boy, it's especially important in the winter. Sinking lines is another way to go. That'll change maybe your fly selection and all that too. When we drift on a boat in the wintertime is when I probably fish sinking lines the most. Again, I'm not going to do it on a 10-degree day. But if I get 20, 25 degrees, it's not going to ice up much. And I enjoy that. Usually I'm using a sinking line when I know that I can get a longer presentation. We use a mono rig a lot of times because our rivers, they're not tiny by any means. They're not even small. But, 50, 60, 80, 100 feet wide maximum. Is that fair to say? On our biggest?
I think that's definitely fair.
And so we are very targeted in the way that we fish streamers a lot of times. We're not trying to bring it across the river 60, 70, 80 feet. But when I'm in a boat, I can start to get these long presentations. It doesn't mean I'm always doing that. But anyway, that's when I use a sinking line. Again, if that's what you like doing, go get it, and have at it in the wintertime, and just think about all the things we were talking about. Do a super pause. Do it with a sinking line. Maybe don't use the fastest sinking line that you have.
Yeah.
The super pause.
Super pause.
Super pause. It's not super. Super. Remember Jimmy Superfly Snooker?
Snooker?
You remember him?
No.
Remember Ricky the Dragon Steamboat?
No.
Ric Flair. You don't know Ric Flair? This is sad. You don't even know Ric Flair.
Is that a cartoon?
I bet you Bill knows Ric Flair. He'd know Jimmy Superfly Snooker too. But anyway.
Is that an old man show?
No, it's WWE or WWF, whatever it was back in the day.
WWF.
You never went to middle school? What the hell? Superfly, the super pause is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think that was as cool for me as it was for you.
You want to talk about flies? You want to end it up talking about flies?
Dusty
You love
roads.
flies. You want to tell us about your super flies?
No, not anymore.
All right, Austin, what about flies? Everybody wants to talk about flies. We talked about nymphs. You brought up, I said anything else? You're like, we should talk about flies last week.
Oh, yeah, the nymph patterns. How
Right.
about the actual fishing of flies?
Right. It's
Yeah.
the first, it's fair because it's the first thing people think about. Like, what should I tie at the end of my line? And we kind of go, what do you like to tie to the end of your line?
We'll probably have a similar response here, but we're not saying they all have to be big streamers, Kelly
No.
Gallup style. Maybe we're not saying they all have to be micro jigging streamers either.
Right.
But they both work.
That's a good point.
Around our waters, we like kind of a medium 3 to 3.5 inch streamer is kind of my bread and butter.
I'll go 2 to 3.5, I'd say.
Okay, so there you go, 2 to 3.5. But again, you also
I just convinced Austin to go smaller. See that? It's all it
well,
took.
I'm going to let you think that while I catch all the bigger fish.
Because big flies for big trout.
Well, yeah, haven't you heard?
No, I didn't know that.
Anyhow, don't tell Dominic. You also have to look about what your rivers hold. So if your rivers hold small bait fish and not a lot of, let's say, sculpins or chubs or fall fish that you may replicate in bigger streamers, or even smaller trout, stocked rainbows. Exactly. Try to mimic what you actually have the best you can.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to throw something weird. Throw that fire orange tiger fly that is staring at you in your box that you'd never take out.
That comes from the Rapala.
Rapala. That's how you pronounce that, right?
Rapala. It's not Rapala. We learned this last season.
If you've ever spoken the language fluently.
Remember that? It's one of those few things Bill was right about and Trevor was wrong about. Go back and listen to, I don't know which podcast it was. Anyway, tiger. That's a popular pattern, like in the lure world. The tiger or something, right?
There you go. Not elitist at all.
No, we're not elitist. So I was thinking about this. I don't experiment very much in the wintertime with patterns. I acknowledge that the fishing is often expected to be a little bit slower. So the last thing I want to do is go out there and fish flies I don't have confidence in. So I don't change colors and patterns very much with streamers. I got 3 or 4 flies that they're going to eat. For me, it's that bunny bullet sculpin. It's a half pint, a full pint, the craft fur jig, maybe what I call a bunny flash jig.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be it. As I'm thinking, what else? I don't know. A headbanger sculpin.
Yeah, I was going to add in a headbanger.
Right on. So 4 or 5 flies. And you could have your own. You do not need to fish mine or Austin's. Austin's suck anyway.
As I said, they only catch the big fish.
He's got like 1 fly.
Well, when I got nothing for you.
He's got nothing. Austin's sick tonight, everybody. He's a little off. It's true. He's a little off.
It's true. I'm just smiling.
Anyway, I fish those flies, and I don't know. It's rare that I'm going to say, oh, let me dig through my whole streamer box and just keep rotating patterns every 5 minutes. I know what they should eat, and if they don't, then I'm probably coming off of streamers and going back to nymphs or dry flies. I don't test that much in the wintertime.
I can't say that's even too terribly different than the way I nymph in the wintertime.
Good point.
I have a handful of flies that I know most days will get the job done, and if they're not going to eat a good presentation of those flies, I might be out of luck, and I don't really blame the flies.
I know.
When I start thinking that way, I'm like, don't go down that road. It's fun to change flies and have new ideas, but to solely accept that the fly is the problem, not a good solution.
Yeah, you got to have some mental discipline and say no. Like you said, you start going down that road. That's a lonely road. Not many fish at the end of that road.
Just you and no fish.
So if they don't eat one of your confidence streamers, you're probably in trouble. Just go home. Don't come back out until April either. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just stay home.
Just wait for the dry flies. And they start in about July. And then we'll see you out there.
Right. That's the real fly fishing anyway. Did you know that? Just dry flies.
Oh.
Everything else, you're just knuckle dragging.
Knuckle dragging?
Yeah, it's caveman stuff.
Oh.
Anyway, so that's what we did a whole episode on, was caveman stuff. That's all we do in wintertime. You got anything else, Austin?
I don't think so, man.
Nothing.
I can't think of anything.
Not tonight. We're so thorough. That's because we had Bill's ideas along with us.
Well, it made it, that much easier. We had the study guide.
With who, what, where, when, why, and how. Thanks, Bill.
Open book test.
That's episode 8. Hey, what about story time? You got a story for us? Winter story, Austin.
Sure. So this story takes place yesterday. I was out fishing.
Oh!
Story worthy already.
Very current.
I was out yesterday evening until dark. And this whole week I've just been kind of off, overtired, not feeling like myself. And
yeah, tell me about it. I see you tonight.
Yeah, I was out there with a buddy of mine. And we were fishing together, and the whole evening I feel like I just couldn't concentrate, couldn't get locked in. I was just fishing weird, not doing well, kind of rushing through, but
yeah,
just in my head. And we get up towards the end of this long run, and it's this hard run that goes into a tail out into this nice pool. And it was about almost 6 o'clock, and the sun was mostly gone, and it was my last few hopes of putting fish in the net.
Yeah.
And I'm fishing this run with a bobber rig, nymphing, and I've put a couple of good drifts throughout the length of it. I'm moving up, and I reach towards the top of it, and I make one last cast, and it's one of those 20-yard drifters, and it's a lot of ground that gets covered, and I'm watching it go all the way down to the bottom. And I think that drifts over. I kind of look upstream, and I go to make the next cast. Well,
right.
Don't you know, when I look upstream, that bobber goes down, and my friend's sitting on the bank watching me, and I hook into was either a snagged fish or a quite large fish, because the moment I hooked into it, I just got dogged completely. Rod went over to the side. I said, "Ooh, what's going on here?"
Downstream,
and tried to get my wits about me. The fish came off. I started into this 45-second stumble, and it's one of those times where
I'd like to see that.
You start falling, you catch yourself, but then you just start running forward, and basically just fell flat on my face into the water. It hit my leg off a rock. Now my knee's all sore, and walked out defeated, and humble pie for me that night for dinner.
Just a reminder that you suck.
Yeah, just a total spirit crusher to end the evening on. If it wasn't challenging enough, here's this. Now go home.
So you foul hooked a sucker is what you're saying at the end of your drift.
That would be, that would be.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
I hooked a fish like that the other day at the very end of the drift. Very end. I mean, I'm almost looking upstream to make the next cast, and there it goes. On a bobber. Like you said, on a bobber rig. And he was all the way down.
But normally when we do that, we still do our best to set the hook downstream.
Oh, yeah.
But for me, I was getting the rod turned into position to fire next upstream cast. So it was in the total opposite intention of the way I would normally try to hook set on a fish downstream of myself. I lost immediately.
You know, you just told another story with a friend in there.
Yeah, you're right.
That's your thing. All your best memories are with buddies.
Yeah, at least I had a witness to back up my embarrassment. Thank goodness.
You're foul-hooked sucker. That's wonderful. My story's like it always is. I was by myself.
You're alone.
It starts, though, with I was fishing with Trevor. It was wintertime, something like winter. The water was open enough that we floated. And then about a week later, I went out fishing and I decided, you know what? I'm going to fish streamers all day. So I do this thing where I decide I'm going to be like a drift boat.
Okay.
And so we acknowledged earlier in this podcast how when we're in a drift boat, we can cover so much water. So I decided, all right, I'm just going to continue to wade downstream all day. I'm going to basically take a walk downstream. If you got to find the right river, I'm going to put myself in the middle of the river and I'm going to fish one of those banks. Sometimes turn around and fish the other bank. Fair enough. I'm going to fish the best bank all day long. However many hours I can put in. I think I probably put in 6 hours this day, I'm thinking of. And I just did it. About halfway through, snow started flying, and it was just good. And I really was doing the gallop thing. I was doing a jerk strip off of the bank. I was putting it on the bank, on the best parts of the bank, and I was going, jerk strip, jerk strip. It wasn't always real fast and aggressive, and they were just eating it. And I'm going to tell you, there were probably 40 fish that chased my streamer, and I probably landed half of those. They ate it a lot of times, a lot of commitment. I went back out the very next day to the same water. I put it in the same spot. I caught 3 fish. And I probably fished the same amount of time.
Well, you know why that is, don't you?
Why?
You beat them all up the day before.
That's what they were scared. They told their friends.
Yep.
And their friends
You fished
said,
them out.
No, we heard about that. No.
You got to find the freshly stocked fish if you want that to work again.
That's right. So I really don't know what it was. And I hope it wasn't what you just said.
How much ground do you think you covered? That sounds like a pretty long day.
6 hours. I'm a bad judge at that. I'm going to say a mile.
Okay.
But, I covered a lot of water. And I just kept wading downstream. You and I and most of us, we fish upstream so often. We stay behind the fish. That's really the only way you can get a true dead drift. And even when I switch over to streamers, I usually continue to wade upstream and I change my casting angles and whatnot. But on this day and on many days, I'll decide, all right, I'm going to wade downstream as I fish streamers. Now, it doesn't mean I'm casting downstream or even quartering downstream. And on this day, again, I was on the gallop jerk strip, which really should start kind of across stream or across and up a little bit. And I had the head of the streamer face down and across.
Yeah.
As it continued toward my rod tip. And it was good. It was fun. I mean,
that does sound fun to kind of mimic the drift boat. I've never kind of imagined that before.
Be like the drift boat. That's the point. Cover as much water as you can. Use the current to just keep you wading downstream and be not necessarily in the middle, but 30 feet off the bank, 40 feet off the bank, maybe at the most. And just maximize your opportunity all day long. Stay disciplined and continue wading downstream. Don't stop. And then walk back to the truck at the end of the day.
Those can be long walks back if the road doesn't follow the stream the same way.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Cutting through the woods, cutting through the fields, through the briars. Hopefully not the briars. They don't make waders that'll deal with briars, Austin.
No. We need a suit of armor, like a metal suit of armor to strap to ourselves when we go through the briar patches.
Right.
Pull them out of the back of your vest pocket and put on your metal armor.
Right. Like a video game.
like a WWF wrestler would.
Bring it all back around.
Yeah.
Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Jimmy Superfly. What?
All right, next week is dry flies. You ready to go with dry flies next week, Austin?
I will be.
Dry flies in the winter next week. This one might be shorter.
Midge. Okay, we're done.
There you go. Fish midges. No, just kidding. Well, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
You ready to read us out? Want me to hold your hand?
Yes. Okay. Remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 900 articles with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, currently featuring the Troutbitten Tip Series, collaboration with Wilds Media. These are short, useful, and unique tips for your fly fishing life. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment, because that really does help. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water. Ooh, what's going on here?
I got to carry this one, don't I?
Don't be afraid.
Stocked rainbows.
Exactly.
Right.
Not elitist at all.
No, we're not elitist.
Don't go down that road.
That's a lonely road.
Just you and no fish.
You need a beer.
I said I don't work.
You don't work. You're broken.
Yeah, I'm out of order. Out of service right now.
I'm out of service. Don't like it.
No good.
No good. It's not good.